this lesson, we are going to discuss homeostasis and feedback mechanisms. At the end of this video lesson, you should be able to describe the process of homeostasis, enumerate the components of the homeostatic system, and discuss the differences between positive and negative feedback mechanisms. A complex system like the human body consists of different important biological processes that affect each other. But how does the body maintain order while allowing multiple processes to go on? Homeostasis is the maintenance of a relatively stable internal environment. It is derived from two words, homeo meaning the same, and stasis meaning to stand or stay. This means that homeostasis aims to let the important aspects of the internal environment of the human body to stand or stay the same despite the different changes that are happening internally and externally. The functions performed by each body system leads to homeostasis, thereby preserving the environment needed for the life and work of all cells within the body. In exchange, cells shape body systems. Thus, homeostasis is essential for the survival of each cell, and each cell, through its specialized activities, contributes as part of a body system to the maintenance of the internal environment shared by all cells. The idea that it is important to preserve a sufficiently stable internal atmosphere does not mean that its structure, temperature, and other characteristics are completely unchanged. In order to mitigate the transition, the body systems trigger effective counter-reactions as some factors attempt to shift the internal atmosphere away from optimum conditions. This means that homeostasis is a dynamic steady state in which the changes that do occur are minimized by compensatory physiological responses. The word dynamic refers to the fact that continuous shift labels each homeostatically regulated factor, while steady state means that these changes do not deviate much from a constant or steady stage. To have homeostatic regulation within the body has a homeostatic control system. It is a dynamically integrated network of components of the body that operates at an optimum level to keep a given factor relatively constant in the internal environment. To stabilize the physiological factor being regulated, homeostatic control systems must be able to detect and resist change. To maintain homeostasis, the homeostatic control system must have the following. First, a receptor that detects deviations from normal in the internal environmental factor that needs to be held within narrow limits. Second, a control center that integrates this information with any other relevant information. And third, an effector that makes appropriate adjustments in the activity of the body parts responsible for restoring this factor to its desired value. Working together to maintain homeostasis, these components form a feedback loop. This is when a stimulus is sensed by the receptor. The receptor then sends information to the control center. The control center will then tell a cell, tissue, or an organ, but usually a gland, to do a certain response as an effector. This effector will make necessary adjustments to the stimulus to bring the system back to normal. There are two types of feedback loops. We have negative feedback and positive feedback. In negative feedback, a corrective adjustment opposes the original deviation from the normal desired level. On the other hand, in positive feedback, the output amplifies a change so that the controlled variable continues to move in the direction of the initial change. Let's look at an analogy for negative feedback mechanism. A common example of negative feedback is control of room temperature. Room temperature is a controlled variable, a factor that can vary but is held within a narrow range by a control system. The room temperature is determined by the activity of an air conditioner, a room cooling appliance that can be automatically turned on or off. To switch on or off appropriately, the control system as a whole must know what the actual room temperature is, compare it to the desired room temperature, and adjust the output of the air conditioner to bring the actual temperature to the desired level. A thermometer in the thermostat provides information about the actual room temperature. The thermometer is the sensor, which monitors the magnitude of the controlled variable. The sensor typically converts the original information regarding a change into a language the control system can understand. For example, the thermometer converts the magnitude of the air temperature into electrical impulses. This message serves as the input into the control system. The thermostat setting provides the desired temperature level or set point. The thermostat acts as an integrator or control center. It compares the sensor's input with the set point and adjusts the cooling output of the air conditioner to bring about the appropriate response to oppose the deviation from the set point. If the thermometer detected a significant drop in temperature, information will be sent to the thermostat. The thermostat will then dictate the automatic switch to turn the air conditioner off. The automatic switch is the effector, the component of the control system commanded to bring about the desired effect. With this, temperature will go back to the desired temperature after some time. If the room temperature is higher than the ideal temperature, the thermostat will enable the automatic switch to turn the air conditioner on. This brings back the temperature to the normal or ideal temperature. Now, let's look at an analogy for positive feedback. Let us consider how confidence boost helps a person. With a good output, let's say on your work or on your studies, people will be impressed on the results of your efforts. These people will respect and applaud your output, giving you a positive feedback. This positive feedback will then boost your confidence to do better. By doing better, you will have a better output that may impress these people more. The cycle will go on until at one point, your output will be at its very best. Thus, the cycle will stop. We saw in this analogy how an action or a process is amplified until the desired outcome is reached. Now, let us look at some actual biological processes that show negative and positive feedback mechanisms. In blood sugar regulation, the stimuli will build the changes in the blood sugar levels. An individual may have a low blood sugar level or hypoglycemic condition, usually in between meals or during fasting, or a high blood sugar or a hyperglycemic condition, usually after meals. For hypoglycemic conditions, peripheral receptors will send the information to the processing centers in the brain, which is the body's integrating center. The brain will then instruct the pancreas to release glucagon. The pancreas will be the effector because it will be the one to correct the deviation by releasing glucagon. Glucagon will now target the liver to undergo glycogenesis, a process in which the stored glycogen will be catabolized or broken down into its glucose building blocks or monomers. This will allow the blood sugar to be on its normal level. On the opposite side of the feedback loop, for hyperglycemic conditions, peripheral receptors will also inform the brain about the increase in blood glucose levels. The brain will then instruct the pancreas to secrete insulin. Insulin will now work to make glycogen in the liver out of these excess glucose molecules in the blood, thus lowering the blood sugar level to make it normal again. Since the pancreas secretes glucagon and insulin to bring back the deviation to normal, blood sugar regulation is a negative feedback loop. Let us look at another feedback loop. In blood calcium regulation, the stimuli will be the changes in the blood calcium levels. An individual may have a high blood calcium level or hypercalcemia, or a low blood calcium level or hypocalcemia. For hypercalcemia, peripheral receptors will send the information to the processing centers in the brain. The brain will then instruct the thyroid gland to release calcitonin. The thyroid gland will be the effector because it will be the one to correct the deviation by releasing calcitonin. Calcitonin will now direct the calcium from the blood to be deposited to the bones, thus decreasing the blood calcium level to normal. On the opposite side of the feedback loop, for hypocalcemia, peripheral receptors will also inform the brain about the decrease in blood calcium levels. The brain will then instruct the parathyroid glands to secrete parathyroid hormone or PTH. Remember that PTH has an antagonizing effect on calcitonin. Thus, PTH will target the bones to stimulate calcium release, thus increasing the blood calcium level to the normal level. Since the thyroid and parathyroid glands secrete calcitonin and parathyroid hormone respectively to bring back the deviation to normal, blood calcium regulation is also a negative feedback loop. Let us now look at the last example. We are going to look at the homeostatic regulation during childbirth. The kicking of the baby during labor makes its head push the cervix, disrupting the situation in the cervical opening. Thus, the kicking of the baby is the stimulus. The nerve receptors in the cervix creates nerve impulses that will be sent to the brain. The brain then instructs the posterior pituitary gland to release oxytocin. Oxytocin will then be carried by the blood going to the uterus to allow contractions. The uterine contractions will make the cervical opening to dilate more and the baby to kick more frequently. The continuous kicking of the baby will trigger the posterior pituitary gland to release oxytocin to allow more uterine contractions. The cycle will go on and on until the baby is delivered. In this feedback loop, the nerve receptors in the cervix are the sensors. Also, the pituitary gland is the effector since it allows the change to be amplified by releasing oxytocin. Thus, this homeostatic regulation is a positive feedback loop. To conclude this lesson, let us review the following key points. The tendency to maintain a stable, relatively constant internal environment is called homeostasis. A homeostatic control system consists of a receptor, control, and an effector. A stimulus triggers the homeostatic control system to function. In a negative feedback loop, the effector opposes or inhibits the stimulus. In a positive feedback loop, the effector reinforces or amplifies the stimulus. And that ends our discussion on homeostasis and feedback mechanisms.